Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Maurice Brown Comedy Hour. We have a special guest here with us today at the 4 o'clock hour, all the way from the northern part of the country, Viking country, Minnesota, and as parts of Canada as well. We have a comedian on the show that's been doing faith-based clean comedy for quite a while. He's got his own radio show called the Daren Streblow Comedy Show that airs in 130 to 100 over 150 markets. You syndicate nationally syndicated radio show in about 150 markets or more. Outstanding comedian, and he's graced the Maurice Brown Comedy Hour to be on our show today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the very funny, the very talented Daren Streblow.
Hey, honored to be with you, my friend. Great
Daren,
to be here.
I appreciate you. And this has been a really interesting deal here with the COVID-19, and we can't do what we want to do. I know you got your radio show, but as far as being a comedian and performing, how have you been dealing with that part of it?
Well, kind of like I'm sure you're doing it too. You're just kind of waiting and waiting to see what's going to happen. It kind of reminds me about after 9/11, kind of what it was like. Everyone just sort of took a pause from doing any sort of bookings and stuff like that, and everyone was scared and worried, and it kind of reminds me of that, except probably three times the levels of worry and different things. It's been interesting to watch, and people really need to laugh, and it's a little bit in some ways now it's a little easier to get access to laughter because you can go do a Google search on something and get something to laugh at, but having that live element and seeing your favorite comedian, I think, is in a live setting has been a little more difficult, and I look forward to things getting back to whatever normal is going to be. That would be nice. Yeah.
Well, over 150 markets.
I think I might have lost you there for a second there. Are you there? I bet you hear me and I can't hear you. Don't you just love live broadcasting? Yeah, I can't hear you. Oh no. I have a great screenshot of you just kind of frozen on my screen. And that's all I have. Oh no. I don't know what to do. I suppose I can just. Oh no. Check 1 2. Are you there? Oh, it's just me now. Well, I guess I'm the new host of the Maurice Brown Show, and I feel you're all disappointed because you wanted Maurice, and I'm just the guest. But it is an honor to be here. I think he'll be back shortly. Back when I used to do radio and this sort of thing happened, we would just go to weather. But since this is a national broadcast, I don't know what the weather is going to be like. So, how interesting. I suppose I could talk about some of the what I'm seeing in comedy as far as people I'm talking to in as far as COVID is concerned.
Hey, Daren, I'm back. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. You're back. I'm glad you're back.
My internet just went out. I don't know what Wi-Fi. That's the first time that's ever happened.
Oh, I blame myself.
Yeah. Why is that?
your internet is like, he's from Minnesota. He's not worth listening to, and then it just kind of dropped me. No,
man, that was weird.
I'm glad you're back. I almost went in a completely boring direction, so I'm glad you're back to add life to this. So good.
Well, look, I tell you, like I said, the last comment before we dipped out or before we were frozen was Robert G. Lee says he didn't get a dime of the 150 markets that you're broadcasting in.
Well, he deserves it. It's in the mail, Bob. It's in the mail. boy, he's been a big part of the show since the beginning. Lots of great comics like Robert G. Lee and so many have been kind of with me since the beginning. My listeners kind of see them as my goofy friends that and it's true. I mean, it seems like all of us in the clean comedy world sort of know each other because it's such a small subset of comedy, and that's
Yeah.
been kind of the fun part of it. So what I wanted from my radio show is to kind of bring people into that world a little bit, like our little get-togethers and the way we laugh together. It's kind of fun.
Well, Robert G. Lee says it was totally your fault, Darren. So I don't know. I'm trying to understand, but
He's hysterical. He is
but
so funny.
dude, I it's interesting you mentioned that because I think what you've been doing a long time, and I'm joining you in the process of trying to get faith-based entertainers seen.
Yes.
Actors and comedians. I was in the movie Love Different in 2016 with Jen Gotzon,
Cool.
Chandler, and she's got a film coming out in November on Thanksgiving called "The Farmer and the Bell: Saving Santa Land." And that's all she does is faith-based stuff. But long story short, it's just it's so many good, clean comics out there that just need more exposure.
Well, you've already done what I've never done. I've always thought it'd be fun to do kind of I don't know. I fell in love with Napoleon Dynamite when it came out. Just the quirkiness of it, and just kind of this love letter to that community, how he brought everybody in. And I was so much like Napoleon when I was a teenager that it just sort of resonated with me. I even had the moon boots and everything. And so I thought it'd be fun to be a part of that. But not everyone who can do stand up is an actor. I've read for a few things. I read for Leland Clausen's movie, and in
Sleeper
retrospect,
Agent.
having me on the screen with Leland, we actually get each other's work because people think we're each other. I've been I get on stage somewhere and they say, now the Canadian sensation, Daren Streblow, and they think I'm Leland. Show us your big hands. And I'm like, oh, they don't look that, So it's kind of funny that way. But you've done more than I have. I've never done really any sort of film work. Robert G. Lee, wow, he makes the films. And if he gets my check someday, maybe he'll let me audition for one of his movies. I'm looking forward to that. That would be awesome.
Well, what I found being a comic, actually helped me to memorize script because, as a comedian, we have tons of information, a bunch of different sets we do, and we just kind of get it. We've developed, everybody's got their own style of remembering, but we got it down to a science. So when you're doing script for a film, it's just word by word by word. And I just found it easier to remember the script because I think I've been doing comedy so long, man. It's just like, Darren, I'll get up to a set sometimes 10 seconds before I go on stage and go, how am I going to remember this?
Yeah.
But
it is hard. It's fun. The nice thing about comedy, when you're doing somebody else's script, they want you to kind of do their script. The nice thing about your own comedy is if you go off script, the only one that's got alarm bells going in their head is yours. You're going, oh no, I've forgotten, but the audience doesn't tend to know, so you can kind of riff a little bit. But yeah, it's people that's actually, Maurice, one of the questions people ask me the most is how do you keep all that up there? And it's the nice thing about it, I memorize it in pieces, and you probably do the same thing. So I have a set memorized, just piece. But I have it memorized in such a way that if something happens, I can go to that piece, do it, and then return back to where I was in the line. And you kind of want to give. I'm like, how many years deep are you now in stand up? Would you say?
I would say dedicatedly 7. I've been doing it for
great.
10.
Terrific, yeah, and I've been doing it. Well, and I don't want to discourage you. I've been doing it 21, and I still feel like I've got quite a few years to figure this out because it's one of those, one of these art forms that it just takes a lifetime to learn. But and to be honest, talking about all this memory, I don't remember where I was going with this.
Well, we're getting up there a little bit, Daren.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah, that's what I was thinking about. But yeah, it's finding who you are in the midst of writing all this, and that's where I was going with this, because uh you want to be presenting your material in a way on stage that it looks like you're not actually following a script. You're just being
right,
you for that amount of time. And
right.
and it takes, even after 21 years of doing this, I'm still feel kind of like a beginner at that. What is your voice? What is that thing
Yeah,
that makes you interesting? And when I started out, I was trying to be all the other comedians that I like so much, just trying to emulate them. But in the process of all those years on stage, you sort of refines you more and more to what this is, and you're worried when you get down to this, is anybody going to actually like it, but it is kind of a interesting
right.
process. Interesting process.
Well, it's interesting because it's you come when you're a comic, you're compartmentalizing um, your routine. So again, versus a script of okay, you shoot spitting the information out in a film or a commercial or whatever. But as comics, it's more idea oriented. So
Yeah.
again, we're the only ones that know what we're going to say. As long as I remember the subject matter is basically good enough for me. I know pretty
Yeah.
much what I want to say.
Yeah.
And so you got all these ideas, but it makes it easier to just put it in compartments. It's okay, I know what joke's coming after that joke. and
Yeah.
and you kind of roll with it like that. And I write a lot of my sets over and over and over again
Yeah.
until I'm one with it. And then by the time I get up there, how am I going to remember all of this? I get up there and it just shoots out. I
That's
mean,
cool.
I never forget my stuff, and I look at myself on video, and I'm going, wow, I do not look like I feel. Like I'm a wreck. I feel I'm a nervous wreck, but I've got it so down to a T that I mean I'm just in total control,
Yeah.
and I can't
Do
even
you, do you
explain.
when you look at yourself on the screen after you've done your set and you're watching it, do you look like you're a wreck from home, or do you think, wow, I look really confident compared to how I felt at
I
the
think
time?
I look really confident compared to how I
Good.
felt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's kind of the illusion that you have to give when you're up there, especially if it's going badly, which will happen every once in a while,
it will.
where, because you can't control all the elements of, if did something bad happen in the
Yeah,
community, or
yeah. Yeah,
or
you can't
is
control
there
that.
uh, uh, some kind of a, I don't know, mic problem or whatever, uh, to be able to just be confident in the moment and just be yourself. And it takes years to do that. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I got kind of a backhanded compliment from a fellow comedian a while back. He said, Maurice, when you're on stage, you always take the position as if you're killing.
That's good. That's very good. Yeah.
Oh,
I remember one show actually that I was doing where it was in a church, and I was up there, and I was found out I was the first comedian they ever had, and there was probably 300
wow.
people there. And I thought, well, this
Okay.
will be fun. Halfway through, I had not one laugh. It was just quiet.
Oh
And
man.
I could hear the air conditioning running in the
Oh my
in the
gosh,
room. I'd hear
man.
little here and there, kind of laughter, kind of stuff. But it just kind of hit me like, I still need to really be enjoying myself. So I just started kind of laughing at my own jokes, which is kind of a no-no. But I just started to
Yeah.
have a really good time with my own material, which I had heard before, so it was tough. And then I got done, and I thought, wow, I could sell used cars or something. And I was at the door, but I had a line of people out the door shaking my hand and I mean, sincerely saying, You are the funniest person I have ever seen in my life. I have never laughed that hard. And it just occurred to me in that setting, in that particular, local, in that church culture, that was how you responded. And if I had taken issue with that and really tried to push them harder or gotten upset with them, it would have ruined what was for them a really nice experience. And so it really taught me to just give what you've got and then let it fall. And sometimes you're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but enjoy the process and do your best.
Well, I find that churches are very tight in general, not all, but in general, and they're very let's see, apprehensive about laughing at something that they might think is antithetical to church. But it's a clean joke. I mean, it's got nothing to do with profanity or lewdness. It's just something. I think when people get inside of a church building, they just feel like, oh wow, I'm in church. But
Yeah.
and that might be
Do
what
you, do
what
you
it was.
not
I know
find
I've
that
got.
in other stages? I mean, I almost kind of find that everywhere, corporates, colleges, especially colleges, uh, clubs, the different clubs. Clubs can be really accepting or really not accepting, depending on where you're being, it's just like anytime you're kind of stepping a little bit on people's sensibilities, they kind of, what are you doing? But, uh, do you think churches are especially sensitive that way? Sensitive that way?
Oh my gosh, dude! I'll tell you a story once, Darren. I'm on stage. I was booked to do a show in front of a church crowd. It wasn't in church, but it was a church crowd. It was a faith-based quote unquote crowd. So anyway, I told a joke about an incident that my wife witnessed on the interstate, which involved a man in a fishnet shirt, right?
Okay.
And so I'm telling the joke. I forget what it was. I only told the joke a couple of times and I just dispatched of it. I guess just for it, but it's funny. I got a lot of laughs. But in the middle of the set, the booker came onto the stage. This actually happened and motioned me towards her and said, "Can you apologize? You just offended my nephew. He's gay."
Hmm.
And I went, "Wow. Sure." So there, I apologized to the guy in the middle of the set, and I continued on, right? And actually ended up having a good set after the show. A number of people came up to me and said, "You shouldn't have done that.
Hmm.
That was hilarious. No one wears a fishnet shirt to a comedy show anyway." Something like
Oh, he
that.
was there.
And
Yeah.
the guy had on a fishnet shirt. I never saw him. Daren, if I did see him, I immediately forgot about him after I saw him. But
Yeah,
I
I've had
was
a, I've had
not
a few
thinking.
shows like that where I'm, just sometimes just playing with people in the audience and we're talking and then things will come out in the conversation and
Yeah,
it'll be very funny to people in the room. So I'll play with it.
yeah,
And in the end, you know, uh, they're embarrassed because of the attention and I always, if I hear about it, I'm mortified and I always apologize, because I don't, that's one of the things. I want everyone who has shown up there that day to really enjoy themselves
sure,
and laugh.
sure.
That's you never go out to purposefully hurt anybody's feelings,
No,
and
no,
that's why
no.
I don't do political stuff. I don't do stuff that I feel is going to instantly freeze half of the room. Like, whoa,
Yeah.
I'm just happy everybody's there, and I want everyone to have a good time.
Well, you
So
never know. I mean, sometimes if you get into those subjects that could be dicey or could be tricky, you never know. In a faith-based or a Christian crowd or a church, you don't know how that's going to be received. But if I told that joke in a regular secular environment, it's all fun and games. But and
yeah,
we're in a politically correct time in America right now where everyone gets offended by something.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
it makes it kind of challenging for comedians. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld, probably the most lucrative comedian in the world by far, as a clean comic, will not even do universities anymore because of the PC environment that we live
Yep.
in, which
Right.
is really interesting for a clean comic like him.
Yeah. And it's too bad because, in order to be funny, you have to play with sort of the element, the emotion, that's for me what comedy is. It's emotional elements
Yeah,
turned into art, and a lot of the things that really work emotionally, are things that people like to talk about it, and it energizes them in a more personal level than just facts. Like for example, if you're, I think comedy back in, let's say the 40s, let's
okay,
go way back. I think
yeah,
comedy, the vaudevillian kind of comedy back then that I've seen that have gotten to, the movies and stuff. It was very sort of ideas based. It was like, I think there was a book I read called, it's Gene Parrott's writing book,
okay,
comedy writing step by step. I think they mentioned these kind of examples where I was like, you know, George Washington was crossing the Delaware, and this happened, and
right,
isn't that funny? Because it's clever, and it is kind of funny, and it is kind of clever, but it's not as emotionally connecting as pain or stuff that's going on in the community right now. Political stuff is very emotional, stuff like that. So,
yeah, yeah,
it's very easy to pick up those elements and put them in your act. People do get offended, so you do have to kind of play this. You can either be the comedian that's like, I don't care who you are, I say what I want when I want, and there's a market for that, or
yeah,
you have to be like, where am I right now? What's the context? And do I be careful? And that sounds like that's being like a, pandering, but I think there is a level of pandering, but I think there's also a level of, you know when you're with a group of uh, Christians, for example, there's some cultural elements there that you can have fun with and play with, that if you did that in a club, they're not going to know what you're talking about, and vice
yeah,
versa.
yeah.
So you have to always kind of tip your hat to what the context you're going into. Wow, we're really in the weeds of writing comedy, aren't we? This must be fascinating for people.
Well, I gotta say this, Darren, when you talk about comics that go against the grain, particularly you were talking about the 40s, but I go back to, I guess, the 60s when you had the Rat Pack out in Vegas and Don Rickles was there. Don Rickles, what is the most he's the meanest comedian that you'll ever probably see to get away with it. Like Don Rickles would attack any race. He would attack anyone, and he came out, looking great. He did a show once where he had a famous joke where he would go, "Is that your wife?" And the guy would go, "Yeah." He'd go, "Oh, terrible," he, and he
You
was
probably
able to
did it
get
every
away
night.
with.
Yeah.
He was able to get away with stuff like that. He said one night this guy knocked out, and he was performing in front of a lot of mafioso guys out there in Vegas too. And so, guy knocked on his door, his dresser door, and Don said, oh no, this is it. It finally caught up to me, right?" And the guy was standing there, said, "Donnie, I think you're hilarious. Can I get your autograph?" So I mean, you go, wow, how did Don Rickles get away with that, Darren? And
Mhm.
I have to say, he was a consummate professional that was so dedicated to his style, he was able to get it over the plate anywhere. It's amazing.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you don't
Yeah.
see that kind of, you don't see comics like that today. And I can go, to
Yeah.
Rickles, I can go to Richard Pryor, I can go to George Carlin, I can go to Steve Martin when he was at the height of his comedy. You know, you can even go to Andrew Dice Clay. I mean, depending on your preference, but there were guys that were huge. Robin Williams, you know, and they had a style that would totally offend today. Probably would not make it over the plate in today's world. And we're clean comics, and I'm not, you know, lifting up that particular style.
No, I get
but
it. Yeah,
they
sure.
were dedicated to that style, and they were able to make it work.
Well, you got a real impression, especially with guys like Pryor and stuff. I mean, the top of their game, that they were who they were on stage. That wasn't.
Yeah.
That was just the core of themselves radiating out. And there's something very alluring about being around that kind of a person. You feel like they really, you know, and when I started in comedy, I was anything but that. I was, you know, I was trying to be real smooth, and I was trying to be real clever and never stammer. I stammer all the time, you know, and I tried to get rid of my Minnesota accent, and I tried to do all sorts of stuff and pretend I never made mistakes. And in the process of, the audience will sort of teach you that, you know, and
how to do it. Yeah.
You can back me up if these things is true. The audience sort of will educate you onto, you know, we don't believe what you just said there, but this we believe because you said it this way. And in your mind, you're working out. And all of that is just sort of getting to the core of what they call in the business your voice. Oh, sorry, my phone just turned. And finding what your true voice really is. And over the course of your career, you're trying to invent a voice for yourself. You know, oh, I must be this guy, but it's not really this guy. You know, and I think the core of who we are is probably a lot more mundane when you don't shine it up and put it up in front of people. But I think in the end, that's the person that people kind of want to see on the stage. And, you know, you're the real you. And it is, to the extent that a comedy performance can be. I mean, on the flip side of that is comedy is very exaggerated, and, you know, it's a performance. You know, it's very you know, it's not real in a sense, but it has to come from a real place. It's very complicated and weird. It's a weird profession we're in. Totally a weird profession.
Well,
totally.
Well, Daren, you're right. The audience definitely is the teacher as you're growing and learning how to do this. And I honestly think that of all the art forms, stand-up comedy is the purest art form that exists. And a close second would be comedic sketch comedy. You know, improvisational comedy is difficult too, but when you're a stand-up, it's you literally versus the entire room, and you have to pull off the effect that you're having a casual conversation that you're literally making up as you just stand there. You're making it look so casual, when in fact you put a lot of work into it. You put a lot of writing into it. You've worked on your pacing and this and that, all these different things. And to pull it off to the extent where the audience is convinced, go back to what you said a moment or two ago about, okay, I like that person, but I don't like that person. So the audience that they like, the person that they like, they're convinced that you're just being, you know, a casual person having a conversation. And it's just not that easy. It's not that way. And we pull it off. And it's just I think it's the purest art form that really exists.
And all it takes is getting up a couple thousand times in front of audiences that don't care about you and having your feelings ripped out of your chest. It only takes
in
a couple
other
thousand
words,
times.
All it takes is a couple of thousand experiences of I'm dying up here.
Yes.
Well,
the early
so
shows.
He said, love Daren Streblow. He supported many other comics. And as he says that, Chris Rossetti, as he says that, tell us about the Daren Streblow comedy show and what it's all about.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's just a weekly get together of comedians, kind of like you do on your show, and we talk. They call in and tell me what's going on. It's performancey based, so it's a lot of routines. We pull on shows like the Old Bananas TV show, Thou Shalt Laugh, and personal projects. Mike Goodwin, our friend, just came out with a brand new project that we've been featuring. We had when Robert G. Lee had his new project, we put it on there, and we've been, so it's kind of celebrating material in this comedy material in this kind of strange subset of comedy, and it's been growing. It's kind of a part of people's weekends. They carry it around in their pocket because we have an app, and it's radio. It's not this. It's not the internet. It's not television. It's the old school kind of radio thing. But what I like about radio is it's got kind of a connective factor that's just a little more. There's sort of a closeness to it that I enjoy, which is sort of fun for me. I think it came from growing up, a child of the 70s and 80s, when we wanted to listen to comedy, there wasn't really a place to go for that. So we had our little cassettes of our favorite comedians or old time radio stuff, and just listening to
Right.
it and trying to, with a theater of the mind, see what was going on. And then when I discovered stand up and bringing, listening to that, and there's something fun about kind of being a fly on the wall in an audio sense and listening what the comedians are doing. And yeah, we've been doing that for 7 years. It's been really quite fun.
So Jennifer O'Brien Stamper, who's a fellow comedian friend of mine, she
Yes.
says, I have an app on my phone. It's a fun show. So you can get your show on an app. Wow.
Yeah. It's fun. It plays really well on there. We've had Jennifer on several times. She's hysterical. And
She's great. She's great.
She does it all. She does stand up. She does improv. She has her own, web series that's fantastic. She's just one of the great privileges of people I know in the mix. Yeah.
She has a web series called, I think, Wives of the Quarantine.
Yeah. It's great. It's super funny. It's like,
it is.
Man, how do you do that? She's got so many characters in her repertoire. I don't know how she keeps up with them all. And she's
Jennifer,
she's
more
fantastic.
Roxy. She's funny, dude. I love Jennifer.
Oh,
she's
she's
great
fantastic.
comic.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something, because I noticed that you've done a lot of churches, Daren.
Yeah.
How
Lots
does
of
you've done a lot, and I mean you've performed in a lot of capacities in faith-based environments. How does your faith influence you as a performer?
Well, boy, that's a great question. It's kind of like a super driving force. I think in the beginning, it was kind of like a marketing thing. It's like, hey, you should let me in. I'm a Christian too. But
Yeah.
God isn't happy with that kind of thing. And I think in the process of, my connection with Christ, he's been showing me over the course of my life all the many ways that I need him so desperately,
Yeah.
to
Amen.
forgive my sin and turn me around. And when I was a young man, I didn't think I had any issues. and the older I get, the more he sort of shows me who I really am. All that as a backdrop, it really does affect your writing because you are cognizant of, well, what would God want in this particular, and it sounds silly, but I'm writing a funny thing. What would God want out of this? I think there's a part of me that, and I remember as a kid in grade school, you have talents and abilities. You don't know what they are, but I was never really popular, but if they started to try to trade barbs with me, I could really be not vicious, but they couldn't keep up with the humor of it. And I could, some guy would be ripping into me and I could have him tease down 6 different ways to, this is the essence of who you are. This is what I see. This is
Yes.
hilarious. This is inconsistent.
Yes.
Bang, bang, bang. And they would literally say, dude, and, back up. And I wouldn't know
funny.
what
I
I
love it.
was, I was like, and there's a certain satisfaction that comes from using, and the reality of that is there's a really distinct line between teasing people, which people enjoy, they like to be seen, and
Yeah.
mocking people. There's a difference there. And I think that's one thing God's really worked on me over the years. Am I crossing that line? Because, I wouldn't want people to, mock me for my, the goofy things about me. And there's plenty. In fact, I'm noticing I don't think I smile evenly. And I don't think it's your software. I think when I say it's just like a crooked face. We could go all day on that. But, there's goofy things about me. But I think God wants me to, when somebody's in the audience, not to cross that line. And people like being teased. I like being teased. I like being seen in a humorous way. I was at one of our conventions one time, and there was an improv group that came in, and I don't know who they were, but they were wonderful. I don't even remember their name. And they realized, oh, we've got a bunch of stand-ups here in our audience. They just got out of the way. They're like, they're not going to let us do anything. And they were just playing games. And one of it was having people imitate each other. And about 4 different people got up and imitated me, including Hawkins was up there imitating my voice and how I do it. He was doing one of my routines. And I was in the back. To be noticed that way was delightful. Hearing my voice like that, I was crying. I was laughing so hard. It was hysterical. Wow. But that wasn't mocking. That was affection. There's a difference. and that's one of the many ways I've been trying to learn and turn my life around based on faith.
So Jennifer O'Brien Stamper says Daren fought the bullies with his comedic rhetoric, which is exactly what you did. And let me tell you something. I had a similar experience growing up. My brother, you get a bunch of black guys around each other, man, as teens growing up, man. And it is on, dude. The insults are flying everywhere, right? So I had an ability to come right back and put a lot of guys down. And you kind of, you're right. You don't want to do that to anyone, but
that's exactly it. Because I would walk away going, look what I just did there. And in my spirit, I felt like, no, don't do that again. Well, Lord, what is this in there for if it's not this kind of thing? No.
Yeah.
I have something different in store for that. It is interesting. And that's the thing I always worry about when I'm on stage and when I bring up, like, I remember once I did I'm not going to mention what it was because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings out there, but I had a situation of employment in the past that caused me pain. And so I thought, what better way to deal with that than just write a routine about it? And so I wrote this scathing critique of who this organization that I work for or whatever, and got it out there. And I noticed the audience froze on it. They just froze. And it was, and I thought, this is really funny. And I feel real energized. Nothing, just nothing. And the guy who booked me, when I was saying, boy, I was doing pretty well till I did that thing and he said, yeah, I think they were just very sad and upset for you. And I realized, I'm not coming at it from someone who's kind of overcome some pain. I'm coming at it from a wounded person who's angry. And instead of making people feel good. I made everybody feel awful for 2 minutes, and I felt, and so
Yeah.
I think, and I talk about this with my boys all the time too. If you watch a movie, and I got this. This isn't an original observation. Uh, McKee wrote a book called Story, which is a very it's a screenwriting storybook. It's got his he's got some interesting things to say.
Okay.
Yeah, but one of the things that he noticed was that you can tell characters in movies that the writers hate. You know, like I think his example, McKee's example, was the Terminator, the
Okay.
robot, which is the villain in the first movie, and
Yes.
very destructive villain, and they loved him. The writers loved him. They gave him great lines, they gave him personality, and he was very, very interesting to watch. You can always
Okay.
tell when you've got an over the top, unbearable to watch character on screen. You go, the writers hate that person. They're dumping on that person. And I think that's very
Okay.
true of stand up. When you bring people you hate and haven't forgiven into the mix, it brings everything down,
Wow.
and you need to come to peace with those characters maybe before you bring, and so when I find myself angry and do some writing about this stuff, I really have to go back to faith, go back to talking to God about, what, I've been forgiven, why can't I forgive, and work through the process of healing in that before you even bring it to the stage. Often I won't bring something to the stage because I worked through it on the faith side, because that's not to say you can't bring anything painful to the stage. The flip side, movies would be no fun without any characters in it that were antagonists. However, you can tell when you've got a 50,000-foot view of the character, as opposed to, I'm still fighting this person every day in my spirit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
Exactly.
that makes any sense, but
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you have to. The anger has to be resolved within yourself in order to get to that joke,
I
and the
think so.
audience is your teacher. The
Yeah,
audience is your teacher.
yeah,
They teach you stuff like that. It's like, no, that's not funny. This is a downer. Because I've done it a couple of times too. I've tried to attack some subjects, but my anger or my negative feeling about the subject hadn't been resolved, so it's not ready to be served yet. You guys got more time in
yeah,
the oven, so you got to
yeah,
let it cook longer, and then you can tell it because there's a lot of gold in there, but
yeah,
the anger has to be resolved before you present it.
yeah,
But you can make a
yeah.
joke out of some really dark experiences, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, if you've worked through it,
Yeah,
I
if you've
think you
worked
can.
through it.
Yeah, I remember early days in the clubs. The more seasoned comics would complain about, someone would get up and I'd watch them, and they were a lot of energy, but the audience was just, and their comment was, "Boy, that was really self indulgent." And I had no
Oh
idea what that
wow.
meant at the time, but I think what they're meaning is that person is trying to use this as a therapy moment, as opposed to making art out of something you've worked out, And
It's a great description. That is a
yeah, and
great
I think
description.
there's got to be room for putting painful stuff up that you're not 100% worked through. That's not what I'm saying, but you sure can tell. You can tell in my act if I try to, you know, do something like that. It just, the audience just won't do it. They'll just be like, "Oh, and this is not the face you want to see out there."
No, that's not the face that you want to see. But I
No,
have.
I have always this. If I do a videotaping, there's always a guy in the front row. He's doing this, and it's usually
Yeah.
one of my uncles. So it's kind of fun.
Now, when you say when, when you say comedy, I have two comedy friends that deal with anxiety. They have panic
Oh
attacks,
yes,
and
I
they
have
get
those.
on
I've had those.
and they get on stage to die for the very reason that they have that issue. But one comic was particularly good at dealing with it on stage. He'll go on a rant, Daren, for like 3 or 4 minutes, and it is absolutely hilarious. And when he gets towards the end of his rant, like he's like emptied himself, he'll go,
Yeah.
he'll go, I've been having a panic attack. And he kind of rights himself and then continues on with the routine. It is absolutely awesome the way that he's found a way to harness
That's
that
wonderful.
anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's
remember
awesome.
a kid at an Acme Comedy Club in Minneapolis. He got up for an open mic. He had never done it before, but he was really well rehearsed. He had his jokes, and he had his family out there, friends, and he was articulate. It wasn't that we couldn't hear him. It's just when you do new jokes, they don't work because they're new. You don't know they're funny to you. That's where you start, but they don't work.
Yeah.
And he kind of, I'm sure, envisioned like what we all did when we first got up. We're going to get out there and it's just going to flow and it's going to be great. He flowed fine, and he'd do his joke and no one would laugh because it was just kind of clever or whatever. And then he would react to the audience so transparently. His emotions were just on his sleeve, and he'd do da-da-da-da punchline. And then he'd do another one. And his responses to the audience not responding were people connected to that fear so strongly. He brought the house down, but it wasn't his act. It was him being transparent. It was almost like he was connecting in front of his jokes. If he could ever learn to connect with his jokes in the way he did that way, because I mean, he got a standing what he got, because every joke he could do was like, I've never seen anything like it since. And he marched through the whole thing. And I wish I could have. I was like, dude, you're awesome. And that, so it's just another lesson of the importance of emotionally connecting, because he had a great set. He just, he didn't know it. So
I don't know if you have ever met Marlo Rutz before.
Oh, yes, I have.
She was on the show a few weeks ago, but she says, Robert, Chris, Jennifer, Maurice, Daren, the awesome company I didn't even know my soul needed right now. Great to see all of you guys. Well, Marlo, thank you so much. That's a tremendous compliment. And I wish you were here. You're very funny as well. So, but I appreciate the compliment. I got to say this, though, Daren, I think that in that description you just gave, when you're talking about the fear or whatever the negative feelings are, it's as long as you're making an effort to like climb out of the hole. As you're talking about the pain, well, everyone can identify with that. We're all trying to get, but when you're in that dark place and you're like, I want to be dark and I don't want to get out, that's when it's like unresolved,
Right.
Right,
exactly.
And it can bring everybody you bring everybody down into that place that you're in. So, but so no, I just
it is therapeutic working through stuff using art, because it makes you look at things from angles that aren't so myopic, and sometimes that can bring some healing, just looking at it that way. But to your point earlier, to faith, that's really where you're going to find the healing, I believe, that we all need is in that. And but bringing that healing into your art, it is, for me, when I watch a comedian who's kind of been in an overcoming situation that I'm familiar with, I feel comfort in that, and I feel, and when they're describing their antagonists and the villains in their stories, I don't feel angry and spiteful towards those people in the story. I almost feel a kind of a what's the word? There's a peace there with that situation. It's kind of like, when you watch a good sitcom where there's this argument going on, there's a real conflict, but when it's funny, you still want to be in the room experiencing it. You'd want to be right there. I think that's the beauty so we can kind of feel each other's conflicts in a way that's healthy and we're all kind of laughing at as we walk away. I think that's kind of one of the things that stand up has to offer as an art form. Probably all art forms have aspects of that.
Well, you feel a connection
yes,
to what they're discussing, And so
absolutely.
Robert G. Lee says, and all this time I thought I killed that night. That's the night he held on to his anger.
It'd be fun to have Robert on here, because I consider Robert a genius, and he's mentored me over the years. It'd be interesting to see what he thinks about all this, because there's obviously a place too for they're comedians. That's their act. It's just exploding with anger up there, and it can be hysterical. I think it's hard to make that palatable. I watched a lot of people in open mic nights trying to make that palatable, and they never did. A few of them who do, it's amazing, but I can't do it.
But I think it's honestly, again, got to be resolved, like Sam Kinison.
Yeah.
The guy just yelled and screamed with pure, raw, utter anger, and he killed. It was hilarious because I think Sam Kinison was look at it like this, Daren. Sam Kinison was in a comfortable place about it. He was perfectly fine with being angry. He was very content with being mad.
There's got to be something healthy about that. Being comfortable with your own emotions. There's got to be comfort.
Well, Sam Kinison was a former preacher, and dude, I don't know his whole story. I do know that he was a former preacher, and all of a sudden he became this angry guy. And he would get on stage and just yell at the top of his lungs. So I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to do that, if you're going to get into those dark places, there's a certain level of peace that you have to have about the emotion. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, but if you have the emotion, it's like, oh, wow, this is grating on me. I don't like this. This bothers me. So you kind of like dumping on the audience, like in a therapy session. And it's like, they're not prepared to help you get out of that hole. I'm like, dude, I can't help you. So I don't know, but it's interesting you talk about that, Daren, because it is kind of therapeutic. As comics, we talk about a lot of things that, we kind of bother us or what have you. I mean, it is therapeutic what we do, but most of the time we're in a good place about it when we get into it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And speaking of all of that, do you have any comedy heroes, guys that you just really looked up to, maybe even patterned yourself after?
Well, this is going to sound like pandering. I get accused of this a lot, but my comedy heroes have sort of become my friends in the business now, because even if you've been doing comedy a week or 50 years, I can watch a person who's got talent and learn something from them.
Yeah.
And because of my show, I really have to look at the nuts and bolts of what they're doing, because it's fitting into the big scheme of my show. And so I have to kind of analyze each one, and I see that brilliance in each person. And there's something about that really what I enjoy. In my early days, I got to say, and this is going to be an obscure reference. Well, I'll start with a not obscure. Sinbad was huge for me.
Okay.
I saw him on Different World, I think it was, and I thought, well,
he was on Different World, yeah.
And then when I was introduced to his stand-up, just the physicality of the way he sold his jokes, and you're right there in the moment with him. That just was so pleasing to my what I wanted to do. So he was a big. Brian Regan was another one.
Gotta love Brian Regan.
Joke salesman, and yes. Just the way he could take, two trucks hauling logs going in different directions, and take that and make it a dialogue and a scenario, and he has so many people that just,
Oh my gosh, he's
you
amazing.
know,
He's amazing.
but the obscure one would be Victor Borga. Does that name ring a bell to you?
It does. I can't
Do you
place
remember
him
Sesame
though.
Street, the guy who had the piano bench with the seat belt, and
Oh man,
he'd fall
I
off his
don't remember.
piano
That
bench and
name
he'd put the
sounds
seat
very
belt on?
familiar though.
Yeah,
Victor
he's worth
Borgia.
researching because he was a phenomenon. He was an amazing musician, but he'd get up in front of these audiences with his beautiful Danish accent and do 45 minutes of stand up, and it was hysterical. It
Wow.
was
Okay.
so funny. And it was a lot of kind of fish out of water. I'm in America, I'm from Denmark kind of stuff. It just destroyed. And then he'd
Wow.
sit down and play the piano and realize this guy was a genius on the keyboards too. And uh, uh, studying his stuff, I when I went to summer camp, they would have talent nights and they'd say do something, and I'd get up and I'd say I'm going to do Victor Borga's plurals routine or his inflationary language. He did a whole bit about the numbers in our language, like wonderful, before, create.
Okay.
There's numbers in our words, and then he'd inflate it to tutorful, crenine, and then he told a whole story with it. It sounds absurd, hysterical. So I did the whole thing, and to this day, people come up and say, "You're a genius! How you came up with that inflationary language?" I told you it wasn't mine. I was doing his stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
but when you want to imitate that, I think that shows kind of a hero sort of thing. I also did some of Brian Regan stuff when I was in high school, and apparently he's got a whole website, part of his website dedicated to people like me who's done his stuff in public forums and talk about it.
Yeah.
Thousands of people, and if every once in a while I get a teenager that'll write me and say that he tried my stuff at a talent night and that it went well, and that makes me feel good, like it's kind of full circle, because that's what I did when I was a teenager. So I kind of
Well,
like
I'm
that.
going to do some research on Victor Borgia. Like I said, that name
Oh, do
sounds
that.
very,
Yeah.
very familiar. And if I saw him, I would go, "Oh, I'm certain I've seen the guy before, but he's just
You
not
have.
ringing a bell
I bet
right now
you've seen him,
visually."
and I got to see him live before he died, and boy, I was packed room, and it was just so beautiful. And yeah, he was a phenomenon. He was incredible.
Daren, when was the point in? Because you said you've been doing comedy for 21 years, which that's a heck of a resume there. What was the point? How long were you into comedy before you realized, hey, you know what? I think I can be pretty good at this. I guess, quote unquote,
Um,
found your
I
voice.
will write that down and let you know when it happens. We're 21 years deep. No, it's
Oh
just sort
man.
of overwhelming how much you need to learn to be as funny as the people I'm mentioning. I think there's a point where you realize they laughed. They laughed at me. Oh, good.
Yeah.
They liked it. And I can do this. I don't know if there's a point that you ever. Well, there is. I'm sure there's people that feel this way. It's like I just destroy everywhere I go. I'm funny. I just exude it. There's got to be people like that. I don't know if I'll ever be that way. I think there's always. I'm not worried about it anymore because those worry nerves get stomped on so many times in
Oh
the
yeah.
early days that you don't have any worry nerves anymore. You're just kind of there hoping for the best. And then when it doesn't, and that happens every once in a while, and the more you do it, it happens less and less. There might be years go by before some really kind of just a quiet audience happens. You just don't freak out. You're just like, oh, that's too bad. But I don't know that I walk into a room and think, yeah, I'm the funny guy. In fact, and maybe you would know this too. I know a lot of people who are just on the cuff, just a lot funnier than I am. Like in a group, they'll never go on stage ever. Have no
It happens
interest.
a lot. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you go, well, why aren't you doing this? And, oh, no, I would never do it. And when as you talk to them, you realize they wouldn't like it at all. They would hate it,
Yeah.
And there's so much for you and me that the sound of a group of people enjoying themselves, where you can hear them and you can hear the spit hitting the front of the stage because they're laughing. That's hard to beat.
It's hard to beat, Daren. Yes.
Being in the middle of that kind of laughter. That's just a taste of the joy of heaven for me. It's just there's nothing better.
There's nothing better than that. I think that therein is where the difference lies between the guy that can be in the break room at work or at a dinner party or just hanging out in front of a coffee shop with friends and just killing. I mean, just killing. But if you ask them, hey man, why don't you try stand up? I mean, I think you'd be great. They'd go, oh no.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
And it's mind boggling because they're so funny, but
Yes.
they don't want to be up there. They don't want to
Yeah.
be up there. And I
That's
think you
funny
have
to
to
me.
get to a point where it's like, because what's involved with stand up is that you have to be able to take rejection.
Yeah.
And I don't know what gives us the ability to take it. Like we can we can take it. I don't know why we are able to do that, but we don't mind it so much. It's not the end of the world. And like you said a moment or two ago, so, oh wow, that's too bad, that didn't work. And we just kind of shrug it off and try it a different way next time. And you just kind of structure your routine based on, as you said, the audience, just the teacher. They teach you, and then
Yep.
you fix it, and then they go, now we'll give you an A. Very
Yes.
good, Daren.
Right.
Very good. So that's what the audience does. So we learn that way and get to a point where we have a comfort zone of, okay, and it's all about being cerebral and just understanding this doesn't work. Don't ever do that again. Don't say this joke in front of that demographic or what have you. There's a lot of pain involved in this art, and people that are naturally funny, they're probably some of the funniest people in the world, and they will never cross that line.
Yeah. To your point earlier, it's like the guy, having the audience there being your teacher. It'd be like painting a painting, and you put a brush stroke and 50 people go, no.
Yeah.
Maybe, it's a hard way to do art, but in the end it's kind of fun.
Got two sons that are like that, 24 and 22. Now the 22-year-old he's a comic. He's a stand-up comic. The 24-year-old is extremely funny, but he wants nothing to do with the stage.
Yeah.
He wants nothing to do with it.
I have a younger sister. Both of my sisters are really funny, but my youngest sister is hysterical, and I don't think she'll ever get up on stage. She just makes me laugh till I scream, and she's just one line or different things. She's just so funny. Not interested, not even close to being interested. And I don't know the movie Seinfeld's movie Comedian, the documentary about him putting his act on the shelf and rebuilding it. There was a club owner in there.
I've heard about that. I've got to see that.
It's very interesting if you're interested in the art form of stand-up because of the comments on it. But one of the club owners in the beginning of the movie says there's a certain compulsion that comedians have that when they have a horrible experience on stage, and I'm loosely quoting him here, they want to get up and do it again. And I thought that's true because you have this painful experience in the early stages, like, oh, that just feels awful, and then it's like, I bet I could do that again Monday better. Yeah, I'll come back. You got it figured out.
Oh, you got to erase that. You got to rectify it, and you got to figure it out. You got to get it right. So we have this thing about. I did a show with my wife and kids, and I come out, Daren, I'm killing. I'm telling these preacher jokes. It's at a spoken word event. It's not really church, but it's church-like. Yeah. So anyway, I'm killing, and I get into this joke that was dicey, and I'm doing so well. I said, if it doesn't work, they'll forgive me. I got him in the palm of my hand. And so I tell the joke, I'm done.
Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, for the next 15 minutes, Daren, nothing.
Yeah.
And,
I've
and I
sat
mean, my
exactly in that
wife,
chair.
oh man, my wife and my kids, they're right there. And it's one thing when it happens to you alone and you absorb it. But then
Yeah.
when you subject your family to it, that's a whole other thing there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, they didn't ask for this.
Yeah.
So
If you got family that shows up, it's over already. I remember this would have been really early. I did
yeah,
an event. It was a prom. I think it was a prom for a big school.
yeah.
And they're all dressed to the nines. And I thought this would be, and I opened my show. I said something, man, everybody looks great. Give yourselves a hand and give yourself a hand because you're never going to look this good again. It's all downhill from here. I thought that was really funny. And
Yeah.
I never recovered from that.
Oh my gosh. Oh man.
It was just this little offhand comment, and they just like, yeah, we hate you now. So,
and when the audience is done with you, they're done with you.
They're done. You're done. It's like, nope. And you're like, oh, that hurts. That hurts. I'm going to do it again Monday. I'll do that joke better.
But again, there's the teacher. Hey, how about it, Daren? There's the teacher at work again. You go,
I learned. Don't
check
insult
that
people.
one off.
I wrote that down. Do not insult people. You'd have thought I would have known that, but no.
Daren, this has been a great conversation, man. I appreciate you being on the show. And is there any way that fans can follow you on social media or contact you for booking?
Well, probably the best way would be my website, DarenStreblow.com. Daren's got one R in it because my mother never wanted you to find my website under any circumstance. So DAREN, Streblow.com. And then
right.
I do have the app. That's probably the best way to keep in touch with what I'm doing. And it's a fun way to listen to the show. And man, it's been an honor to be on your show. I appreciate you. You put people at ease, and it's really fun to chat about all things comedy. And I'm looking forward to seeing all the good things happening in your career as the years unfold. So thanks for letting me be here.
Hey, I listen. It's an honor having you on the show. Thank you, Daren, for being on the show. And Jennifer, thank you for the compliment. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, Jennifer, for hanging out. I appreciate it. Matter of fact, I got to contact you, Jennifer. We have to do a show on this platform. I started doing this, Daren, on Instagram Live. And it's you can do the two-way, but it's very mundane. You don't have graphic. You just can't do it. You're just talking. It's like FaceTime conversation.
Right.
On this platform, you can kind of play with the graphics a little bit. I can promo my shows and things. Like matter of fact, I got a show coming up for everybody that's still listening. Coming up next week on September 9th at 2 p.m. I'm doing a show. That show right there with Sparkle Comedy. That's with Mark Palchik and company. Matter of fact, you guys can tell I'm still learning how to manipulate the stuff. Here it goes, Daren. So coming up next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Sparkle Comedy hosted by Mark Palchik. That is going to be, that's an old folks show. You got to be 55 and above if you want to be on that show. And I made the cut. Hey, Daren, I made the cut. So, that's anyway, awesome. That's got to be fun. So anyway, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with the very funny, the very talented Daren Streblow on the Maurice Brown Comedy Hour. Check his show out. His nationally syndicated radio show called the Daren Streblow Comedy Show. Daren, thank you once again for being on the show. God bless you, brother.
Friend. Quite an honor. Thank you so much.
And Daren, stick around. I want to talk to you a little bit after the show. Thanks, Daren. God bless you.
Thank you.